When I saw my ex-in-law standing on my doorstep, I felt my world shatter. They weren't here for a friendly visit. They wanted full custody of my children. I was exhausted, terrified, and out of options until I found a hidden letter my ex had written years ago. One letter changed everything, and suddenly the fight wasn't hopeless anymore. When I opened my front door and saw my ex-in-law standing there, I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined they would try to take my children. After a painful divorce, they used every emotional tactic in the book to challenge my custody. I felt powerless, scared, and completely alone, until I found a hidden letter my ex-husband wrote years ago. That letter wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that he trusted me to be the one who should raise our kids, even if things fell apart. With that secret, I took a stand. In this story time, I'll walk you through the legal battle, the emotional roller coaster, and how I learned that love, truth, and steadfastness matter more than control. If you've ever faced family drama, in-law conflict, or felt like someone was trying to rewrite your role as a parent, this story is for you. It's about justice, healing, and the power of a simple confession. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have done the same? Subscribe for more real-life stories every week. When I opened the door and saw them standing there, my stomach sank so hard I felt like it would never rise again. It was a Tuesday morning, and the sunlight spilling across my kitchen counter smelled faintly of burnt toast and coffee that had gone cold while I was shuffling the kids into their school bags. I just dropped Emma's lunchbox on the counter with a tired little thud when the knock came. A firm, deliberate sound that seemed to echo in the hollow corners of my small, quiet house. I wasn't expecting anyone. My ex-husband, David, had moved out 6 months ago. The divorce papers were signed. I was technically free. And yet, somehow, freedom had never felt so fragile. I opened the door to find them, my former in-laws, standing there as if the house belonged to them. Mrs. Carlyle's sharp eyes swept the doorway, sizing me up. Mr. Carlyle, tall and imposing, shifted his weight from one polished shoe to the other, hands tucked into his pockets. They both carried that look, practical, unyielding, like they were about to correct a grave mistake I'd somehow made. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," Mrs. Carlyle said, her voice syrupy sweet, but there was steel beneath it. We wanted to talk about the children." My chest tightened. "About the children?" I echoed. My voice sounded small in the doorway. "Yes," Mr. Carlyle said, stepping forward a little. "We think it might be in Emma and Jake's best interest if they spent more time with us, permanently." It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. My hands pressed against the doorframe for support. My children, my little Emma with her freckled nose and tangled brown hair, my Jake with his tiny stubborn fists and endless questions, taken from me like they were objects, like they were negotiable. I wanted to laugh, to tell them they had no right, that the court would never allow this, but my voice wouldn't come out. I could only stare at them, these people who had once smiled politely at dinner parties in my living room, now standing there like conquerors in my home. I closed the door gently but firmly and leaned against it for a moment, breathing in the scent of my house, the faint aroma of vanilla from the candle I left burning last night, the faint tang of disinfectant from the morning cleaning spray, the ghost of my children's cereal from breakfast. This was my sanctuary, and somehow it was under siege. Life before the divorce was ordinary, predictable. I met David in college, the kind of romance that felt like it had been lifted from a movie script, all late-night coffee, stolen kisses in the library stacks, and quiet promises whispered under the stars. We married after 5 years, and 2 years later Emma came along, and then Jake. Our little family was enough. Or at least I thought it was. I worked as a nurse, long shifts that left me exhausted but fulfilled. David had a steady job, traveled sometimes, but always returned with stories that made our kids giggle at dinner. And the Carlyles? They lived a couple of blocks away, a constant presence hovering just beyond our doorstep. I always assumed their attention was well-meaning, protective in the way grandparents can be. I never imagined it would turn predatory. After the divorce, I moved into a smaller house, a cozy place with creaking floors and a kitchen that always smelled faintly of baked apples. I wanted stability for Emma and Jake, something warm and familiar amid the upheaval. David had agreed, grudgingly, to shared custody. I had thought that was enough, that the courts would respect my role as their mother. But now, here they were, his parents, suggesting that my role might not matter anymore. The first clue that something was amiss came weeks before their arrival. Emma started asking odd questions. "Mom, why does Grandma keep calling you not the real mom?" she asked one evening as I helped her with her homework. I froze. Her pencil paused mid-air. "What do you mean, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, hiding the spike of panic that shot straight to my chest. She said, "We're just temporary, that we should spend more time with her." I forced a laugh, a soft cuckle that didn't reach my eyes. "Sweetheart, Grandma doesn't mean that. She loves you, but she's just a grown-up sometimes, forgets how to say things right." Emma frowned, but accepted my answer, tucking it away like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Then Jake began waking up at night crying, muttering things about Grandpa taking us. I held him close, running my fingers through his hair, telling myself it was just the residual anxiety from the divorce. That's what I told myself, until the letters started arriving. I found the first one slipped under the door while I was at work, a crisp, white envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. Inside, a note from Mrs. Carlyle. Delicate handwriting, polite and commanding all at once. "We hope you understand that the children's well-being is our priority. We would appreciate a meeting to discuss the custody arrangement in a more permanent sense. It is for their own good." It wasn't a threat, not directly, but I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me. Every line was calculated. Every word was a reminder that they were watching, plotting, waiting. The day they came to my door, I realized their visits weren't casual. They were strategic, intentional, rehearsed. I could see it in the way Mrs. Carlyle positioned herself, like a chess player anticipating every move, every reaction. I spent that day walking through my house, touching objects as if they would anchor me. Emma's stuffed rabbit, frayed at the ears, Jake's train set, half assembled on the living room rug, the family photos I had hung carefully on the walls, all of us smiling, captured in moments that were mine alone. I memorized their faces, pressed my palm to the doorframe, and whispered to myself, "I cannot let them take this. I cannot lose my children." The tension mounted over weeks, phone calls, messages, visits under the guise of checking in, always with that polite insistence that they knew what was best. Every interaction felt like a test. Every smile from Emma felt tinged with confusion. Every hug from Jake, a plea for reassurance that I wasn't going anywhere. Then late one night, while packing a box of old photographs to clear the attic, I stumbled upon something I hadn't seen before. A letter, yellowed at the edges, tucked behind the old divorce papers. My name was on it in David's handwriting. My heart skipped. I didn't open it immediately. I held it like a fragile bird, fearing what flight might bring. When I finally unfolded it, my eyes scanned the words and my knees almost buckled. If anything ever happens to me, if our marriage fails, I wanted to be clear that the children's mother is the one who should remain with them. My parents may not understand my choice, but they will have no claim to Emma and Jake without my consent. She is their anchor, their home, their love. I reread it, then again and again, The letter, years ago written in David's steady, careful hand, was a lifeline, a secret he had kept, a testament to his respect for my role as mother. Tears blurred my vision, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way forward. Maybe I wasn't powerless. The next morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose, though my hands still trembled as I held David's letter against my chest. The sun poured weakly through the half-closed blinds, dust motes dancing in the light like tiny specks of hope. Emma and Jake were still asleep, their soft breathing filling the quiet house. I had to act carefully. Too much emotion could alert the Carlyles that I had discovered their plan. I spent the morning making calls, first to my lawyer, Mrs. Rivera. Her voice on the phone was sharp but comforting, a steady anchor in the storm. "I found something," I said, my voice tight. "A letter. David wrote it years ago, saying I should remain with the kids if anything ever happened." Mrs. Rivera paused, then replied, "That's significant. That changes everything. If you bring this to court, it will clearly establish your primary custodial rights. But be careful. The Carlyles are strategic. You'll need evidence that's unassailable." Her words echoed my own fears. They were strategic. Everything about their polished appearances, their soft-spoken instructions, their constant concern about Emma and Jake, it was all a calculated effort to chip away at my authority, to make me doubt myself until I crumbled. I spent the afternoon preparing, organizing the letter in a folder with copies of our custody agreement, school records, medical records, anything that showed I had been the consistent, loving presence in my children's lives. Each page I stacked felt like another brick in a wall I was building around my family, a wall they would not breach. When the Carlyles arrived that evening, their polite smiles were sharper somehow, almost predatory. Mrs. Carlyle adjusted her pearl necklace as she entered, her eyes darting briefly toward the living room where Emma and Jake were playing quietly. "We thought we might discuss arrangements for the children," she said, voice sugar-sweet with an underlying note of expectation. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, my hands steady on the back of the sofa. "Of course. Come in." The conversation started like any ordinary meeting. Questions about school, about extracurriculars, little comments about Emma's art projects or Jake's soccer practice. But there was a tension beneath every word, a veiled intention I could feel pressing against the calm rhythm of my household. Then Mrs. Carlyle leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know, we're only thinking of what's best for the children. It's not personal. We just have more resources to offer them. Stability, guidance." I let the words pass over me, keeping my tone measured. "I understand you want what's best, but Emma and Jake have a stable home here. They know this space as their own. And emotionally, this is where they're secure." Her eyes flickered, and I knew she realized I was no longer the uncertain, exhausted woman I had been during the divorce. I was prepared now, determined. That night after they left, I sat on the edge of my bed with the letter in my hands, rereading David's words. I thought about how carefully he had written it, how he had anticipated the chaos and the schemes of his parents. There was a quiet courage in his handwriting, a trust he had placed in me even when he was no longer in our lives. The next week was a blur of strategy. My lawyer filed an emergency motion to prevent any unilateral action by the Carlyles regarding the children. I coordinated with the school, ensuring the teachers and counselors knew the situation and could verify my presence as the primary caretaker. Every phone call, every email, every small detail was a brick in the fortress I was building around my family, a wall they would not breach. Meanwhile, the Carlyles tried subtle pressure tactics.
phone calls in the middle of the night, polite invitations that felt like ultimatums, conversations designed to make Emma and Jake question where they belonged. I watched my children carefully, listening to the fears they whispered at bedtime, reassuring them, holding them close, and telling them the truth in age-appropriate ways, that no one could separate them from the home they loved, not if we stayed together, strong and honest. You and Jake belonged here, with me. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. That moment, small as it was, felt like a victory. I realized that the emotional battle for our children was just as critical as the legal one. If Emma and Jake felt fear or confusion, the Carlyles could exploit it. I had to ensure they felt secure, loved, and anchored in the truth. Then came the court date. Walking into the courtroom that morning, I felt my chest tighten. The smell of polished floors and stale coffee filled the air. Children's drawings pinned to the bulletin board in the hallway made my stomach lurch with a mixture of nostalgia and anxiety. I held the folder with David's letter close to my chest, feeling the weight of its words like armor. Mrs. Rivera guided me into the courtroom, and I could see the Carlyles already seated across from me, their calm, practiced expressions hiding the storm beneath them. They looked confident, almost smug, as if they had already won. The judge called the hearing to order, and the Carlyle's lawyer began their opening statement, painting a picture of two children who needed the resources and guidance of their grandparents in a way that was polite but subtly undermining me. I felt my heart rate spike, but I focused on my breathing, reminding myself of the letter tucked safely in my folder. When my lawyer stood to present our case, she pulled out the letter and read it out loud. The courtroom fell silent as David's words echoed through the room. If anything ever happens to me, if our marriage fails, I want it to be clear that the children's mother is the one who should remain with them. I watched the Carlyles' faces pale slightly, their composed masks slipping just enough for me to see the betrayal reflected in their eyes. The judge leaned forward, scanning the letter, and I felt a flicker of hope. This was the proof, the lifeline that could protect my children from being torn from their home. When the hearing adjourned, I walked out of the courtroom holding Emma and Jake's hands tightly. Outside, the sun shined bright, warm on my face, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of relief that wasn't tempered by fear. The Carlyles were quiet, their attempts at manipulation foiled by a simple, honest act of love that David had recorded years ago.
The days after the court hearing were quieter than I expected, almost eerily so. The Carlyles retreated, at least outwardly. Their visits became formalities rather than the insidious intrusions they had been before. I sensed the tension every time they spoke, the careful politeness that barely concealed their frustration. But for the first time, I felt like I had a foothold, a boundary they could not cross. Emma and Jake noticed the change too. They began laughing a little more freely at breakfast, Jake no longer asking if Grandma and Grandpa were going to take him, and Emma humming as she painted in her room. That small sense of normalcy was like breathing fresh air after months of being underwater. I still had to be vigilant. Every phone call from the Carlyles was answered politely but firmly. Every invitation was declined with tact. And yet, despite the tension, I began to notice subtle shifts in myself, too. The fear that had lodged itself in my chest like a stone was slowly dissolving. I was starting to feel empowered, capable of standing my ground without being unkind. One afternoon, while tidying up the living room, I found myself holding David's letter again. I traced the words with my finger, the familiar curve of his handwriting bringing tears to my eyes. I hadn't realized how much I had needed that affirmation, not just for the court, but for myself. The letter reminded me that Even though David was gone, he had believed in me, trusted me, and had, in his own way, prepared me for this battle. It was around that time that I noticed something else, subtle cracks in the Carlyle's strategy. Mrs. Carlyle's calls became less frequent. Mr. Carlyle avoided eye contact when he saw me at the school drop-off. I began hearing whispers from neighbors, small murmurs that suggested their influence wasn't absolute. That knowledge gave me a quiet satisfaction, not a gloating kind, but a calm reassurance that justice often works in small, quiet ways before it manifests fully. Then came the letter from my ex-husband himself. I hadn't expected it. I had thought his role in this story was over. But one morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, only my name in familiar handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I am sorry for leaving so abruptly, for leaving you to fight this alone. I know my parents can be overbearing. I trust you, and I know you will protect our children. I hope one day you can forgive me, not for yourself, but for them. They deserve a father who supports their mother. I love you both still, in the only way I can. I sat on the curb outside my house, the envelope trembling in my hands. Tears blurred my vision as I read and reread the words. There was no bitterness, no demand, just acknowledgement and trust. David's presence in this small act reminded me that family isn't always about proximity. Sometimes it's about faith and belief in one another. That evening, I gathered Emma and Jake in the living room. The sun was setting, spilling gold across the hardwood floor. I want you both to know something, I began softly, brushing Jake's hair from his eyes. No one can take you away from this home. Not Grandma, not Grandpa, not anyone. You're safe here, and I will always protect you. Emma's eyes welled up, and she leaned against me. I know, Mom, she whispered. We love you. We want to stay here. Jake nodded, his small fist squeezing mine. Forever? Forever, I promised. And for the first time in months, I felt the full weight of that promise and the certainty that I could keep it. The weeks that followed were a blend of relief and continued vigilance. I knew the Carlyles were still smart, still calculating, but they had lost the leverage they once held. They could no longer manipulate the children's emotions or question my authority without exposing themselves. I began documenting everything: school events, extracurricular activities, bedtime routines. Every moment, every interaction became part of a record, not because I distrusted my children, but because I wanted to ensure that, should any future dispute arise, I had an unassailable foundation. During this time, I also leaned on friends and neighbors, building a quiet support network. My best friend, Marissa, became a lifeline, checking in on me, watching the children when I had late shifts, and helping me sort through the emotions that had accumulated like dust in a corner I hadn't noticed. One evening, as I tucked Jake into bed, he whispered, Mom, do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever stop trying? I stroked his hair, feeling the tiny warmth of his forehead against my hand. I said, they may try, sweetie, but what matters is that we know the truth, and we stick together. That's stronger than any of their plans. He sighed, a small, contented exhale, and drifted off to sleep. Emma peeked in from the doorway, giving me a small, reassuring smile before running to her room. That night, I lay in bed thinking about how fragile life can be, how easily control can slip from our hands, and yet how resilience and quiet strength can rebuild what has been threatened. The pivotal moment came unexpectedly. One late afternoon, I received a call from the children's school principal.
She said, I just wanted to let you know that the Carlyles have withdrawn their request to see the children outside of the standard visitation schedule. They've decided to step back. My hands shook as I hung up. Relief, disbelief, and a wave of triumph rolled over me. I had fought hard, yes, but it wasn't just the legal battle that won. It was honesty, trust, and the silent testimony of love that guided every choice I made. I realized then that the Carlyles' influence had been built on fear and uncertainty. Once the letter had surfaced and my resolve strengthened, their power dissipated. The moral of the story crystallized in my mind. Even when faced with intimidation and manipulation, truth and steadfast love are invincible. The following days felt lighter. I could breathe again, and so could the children. We cooked together, laughed together, and began reclaiming the small rituals that make a home feel like a sanctuary. I noticed things I hadn't in months: the way sunlight gleamed on the kitchen counter in the morning, the smell of Emma's crayons when she drew at the table, the tiny squeals of delight when Jake jumped in a puddle outside. I even found myself revisiting the letter one last time, tracing the lines of David's handwriting with a soft smile. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was proof that people, even those who leave, can still offer trust, hope, and guidance. For the first time in a long while, I felt like the storm had passed. The Carlyles were still in our lives, yes, but the dynamics had shifted. The children knew where home was, and I knew that I had the strength and clarity to protect it.
Life began to settle into a rhythm I hadn't experienced in months. The mornings were quieter, filled with the soft clatter of breakfast dishes and the hum of the coffee maker. Emma would hum while brushing her hair, Jake would chase the dog around the living room, and I would sit at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee and feeling the small, grounding pulse of normalcy. The Carlyles' presence had become less invasive, but I still had to navigate their carefully constructed politeness. Every interaction was like walking a tightrope. I had learned to keep my voice calm, my body language neutral, and my intentions clear. No longer was I fearful, I was strategic, confident in my role as the children's mother and protector. One Saturday afternoon, I received a text from Mrs. Carlyle. We were thinking of taking Emma and Jake to the park tomorrow. It would be nice for them to spend some time with us. I paused, considering my response carefully. The legal battle had ended in our favor, but I didn't want to create unnecessary tension. I replied, politely declining, citing the children's weekend routine, a subtle, controlled message. Boundaries set, without confrontation. The next day, I watched Emma and Jake play in the yard, the wind carrying the scent of fresh grass and the laughter of my children. I felt a sense of gratitude so profound it was almost dizzying. After months of fear and uncertainty, we had reclaimed our home, our lives, and our children's sense of stability. Yet, I knew the Carlyles were not entirely defeated. Their disappointment was a quiet presence, lurking in polite greetings at school events and careful questions at parent-teacher conferences. But I had discovered an important truth. Influence without love, manipulation without empathy, could only take a person so far. Real connection, trust, and care, the things that Emma and Jake knew I gave them every day, were unassailable. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table organizing the children's artwork and school papers. Emma wandered in carrying a drawing she had made of our family. It was a simple sketch, 3 stick figures holding hands with the sun smiling above. But something in her expression stopped me. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't want anyone to tell us who our family is. I just want us." Her words hit me like a jolt. She didn't understand the full weight of what had happened, but she grasped the essence. Family wasn't defined by appearances, by grandparents, by external expectations. It was defined by love, by presence, by the choices we made to protect and nurture one another. I hugged her tight,
feeling the warmth of her small body against mine. "I know, sweetie," I whispered, "and that's exactly what we are. Our family is here, always." Jake joined us holding Emma's other hand, and together we sat at the kitchen table, a quiet testament to resilience, love, and the bonds that could not be broken by fear or manipulation. The months that followed were a blend of routine and growth. I focused on being present for the children, attending every recital, every soccer game, every parent-teacher meeting. I started journaling again, recording the small, intimate moments that defined our life. Emma's tiny hands covered in paint, Jake's triumphant grin when he scored a goal, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings. Each memory was a building block, reinforcing the stability I had fought so hard to preserve. Occasionally, I would see the Carlyles at school events, their polite smiles still present, but tempered now with recognition. They no longer tried to assert control. They were guests in our lives, not the authors of our story. I realized that sometimes victory isn't about confrontation, but about steadfastness, consistency, and the quiet power of truth. One afternoon, as I watched Emma and Jake playing in the yard, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The fear, the uncertainty, the court battles, they had been harrowing, but they had also revealed a strength in me I didn't know existed. I had discovered that protecting my family wasn't just about legal rights or documents. It was about presence, consistency, and unwavering love. Then came an unexpected gesture. Mrs. Carlyle appeared at the door one morning holding a small basket of flowers. Her expression was softer than I had ever seen it. "I just wanted to say," she began, her voice hesitant, "that I understand now. You've done an incredible job with the children. They're happy, stable, and loved. I... we didn't fully understand before." I nodded, accepting the flowers with a small smile. There was no warmth in the gesture, no surrender of pride, but there was acknowledgement. That was enough. Sometimes the moral victory isn't about forcing recognition, but allowing it to surface naturally. Emma peeked around the corner, curious in her wide eyes. "Mom, who's that?" "Grandma," I said gently. "She brought flowers." Emma looked at me, then at the flowers, and smiled. "They're pretty, but we're still us, right?" "Always," I promised, feeling a quiet swell of pride and relief. With the Carlyle's attempts at control finally diminished, I began to focus on the future rather than the past. I enrolled in a creative writing class, something I had always wanted to do but had put aside while navigating divorce and custody battles. I spent evenings at the desk, pen in hand, recounting memories, reflecting on lessons learned, and exploring the emotional depth that had been my life's constant companion. Emma and Jake thrived in this new chapter. Their laughter returned to the house, filling every corner with a sound more precious than any victory in court. They were secure, not because of legal documents, but because they had a mother who loved them fiercely and unconditionally, a mother who had fought for them quietly and persistently, and who would continue to do so every day of their lives. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, the sun slanting through the windows, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the faint aroma of pancakes. I watched the children eat their breakfast, their small hands moving rhythmically, unhurried, content. The fear that once gripped my chest seemed like a distant shadow, replaced by a steady warmth. I picked up David's letter from the counter and ran my fingers over the paper one last time. It had been more than just words. It had been faith, trust, and a lifeline when I needed it most. And in that quiet moment, I understood something fundamental. Family is not determined by bloodlines alone, nor by authority or intimidation. Family is defined by love, presence, and the willingness to fight for what is right. And we had fought, together, and won.
The weeks after the Carlyles' withdrawal felt almost surreal. There was a lightness in the air I hadn't breathed in months, like the house itself had exhaled and finally relaxed. Emma and Jake's laughter echoed down the hallway, unprompted and full of joy. Even the dog seemed to sense the shift, padding around the living room with a lighter step, as if sensing the tension had dissolved. I began to notice small things that had eluded me during the storm of the past year. The way sunlight pooled on the kitchen floor in the late afternoon, the smell of pancakes on Sunday mornings, the sound of Emma humming softly while drawing at the table, Jake's delighted squeals as he built elaborate structures with his Lego blocks. These ordinary moments had become extraordinary, and I realized how much I had missed them while caught in fear and uncertainty. One evening, after dinner, I sat with the children on the sofa, watching them fold laundry together. They were bickering softly over who got to fold which towels, but there was a rhythm to it, a sense of shared responsibility and playful negotiation. I smiled quietly, feeling the weight of the past year slip from my shoulders. "Mom," said Emma, suddenly, holding up a mismatched pair of socks, "do you think Grandma and Grandpa will try to take us again?" I set my coffee mug down and looked at her, my heart swelling. "Honey, they might want things sometimes, but no one can take you away from the home you love, from the family that loves you. You and Jake belong here, with me, always." Jake nodded vigorously, hugging his sister tightly. "Yeah, forever." I laughed softly, feeling a warm surge of pride. They understood, even in their small way, the strength of our bond. And I realized that this was the essence of victory, not legal documents, not letters, not threats, but the trust and love that the children felt in their hearts. A few days later, I received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Carlyle. My first instinct was to bristle, to answer curtly, but something in her voice stopped me. "Hello," she said, her tone unusually tentative. I wanted to apologize for the stress, the interference, the everything. I see now that I overstepped. You've done an amazing job with the children, and they are happy and safe. That's what matters. I paused, considering my response carefully. There was no warmth in her words, no attempt to manipulate, just acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said, finally, my voice calm but steady. "I appreciate that. I hope moving forward we can all support the children without trying to control them." There was a brief silence. Then she replied, "Yes, that's all I want too." I hung up and sat back, letting the quiet settle around me. The moral of the battle had become clear. Standing firm with integrity, love, and patience can transform conflict into understanding, even if grudgingly earned. With the immediate threat behind us, I turned my attention to rebuilding life in a fuller, more intentional way. I returned to hobbies I had put aside, revisited friends I had neglected, and found small joys in everyday routines. I started keeping a journal again, writing not just about events, but about emotions, the subtle, often overlooked moments of triumph, connection, and growth. Emma and Jake thrived in this environment. Their schoolwork improved, their social interactions flourished, and their emotional resilience grew. I watched as Emma comforted Jake when he fell on the playground, as Jake shared his toys willingly, as they navigated minor disagreements with patience and understanding. It was a reminder that children absorb not just love, but example. I had fought for them, yes, but I was also showing them how to navigate life with courage and integrity. One evening, after dinner, I sat with the children on the sofa, watching them fold laundry together. They were bickering softly over who got to fold which towels, but there was a rhythm to it,
a sense of shared responsibility and playful negotiation. I smiled quietly, feeling the weight of the past years slip from my shoulders. "Mom," said Emma, suddenly, holding up a mismatched pair of socks. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will try to take us again?" I set my coffee mug down and looked at her, my heart swelling. "Honey, they might want things sometimes, but no one can take you away from the home you love, from the family that loves you. You and Jake belong here, with me, always." Jake nodded vigorously, hugging his sister tightly. "Yeah, forever." I laughed softly, feeling a warm surge of pride. They understood, even in their small way, the strength of our bond. And I realized that this was the essence of victory. Not legal documents, not letters, not threats, but the trust and love that the children felt in their hearts. A few days later, I received an unexpected phone call from Mrs. Carlyle. My first instinct was to bristle, to answer curtly, but something in her voice stopped me. "Hello?" she said, her tone unusually tentative. I wanted to apologize for the stress, the interference, the everything. "I see now that I overstepped. You've done an amazing job with the children, and they are happy and safe. That's what matters." I paused, considering my response carefully. There was no warmth in her words, no attempt to manipulate, just acknowledgement. "Thank you," I said, finally, my voice calm but steady. "I appreciate that. I hope moving forward, we can all support the children without trying to control them." There was a brief silence, then she replied, "Yes, that's all I want too." I hung up and sat back, letting the quiet settle around me. The moral of the battle had become clear. Standing firm with integrity, love, and patience can transform conflict into understanding, even if grudgingly earned. With the immediate threat behind us, I turned my attention to rebuilding life in a fuller, more intentional way. I returned to hobbies I had put aside, revisited friends I had neglected, and found small joys in everyday routines. I started keeping a journal again, writing not just about events, but about emotions, the subtle, often overlooked moments of triumph, connection, and growth. Emma and Jake thrived in this environment. Their schoolwork improved, their social interactions flourished, and their emotional resilience grew. I watched as Emma comforted Jake when he fell on the playground, as Jake shared his toys willingly, as they navigated minor disagreements with patience and understanding. It was a reminder that children absorb not just love, but example. I had fought for them, yes, but I was also showing them how to navigate life with courage and integrity. One evening, as I tucked them into bed, Emma whispered, "Mom, I'm glad you fought for us. We needed you." Jake chimed in, "Yeah, you're the best mom ever." I hugged them both tightly, feeling tears prick my eyes. "And I'll always fight for you, no matter what. You're my world." It struck me then how far we had come, from fear, uncertainty, and manipulation to security, love, and clarity. The Carlyle's influence had faded, replaced by a respect born not of intimidation, but of undeniable truth. Months later, I found myself reflecting on the journey while sitting at my kitchen table, the golden light of late afternoons spilling across the floor. I picked up David's letter once more, reading the familiar words and letting them sink in. He had written not just to protect the children, but to give me strength, to remind me of my worth and capability as a mother. I realized that the letter had been more than a legal safeguard. It had been a symbol of trust, faith, and quiet courage. And in a way, it mirrored my own journey, the battles I had faced, the patience I had cultivated, and the steadfastness I had maintained. The moral was undeniable. In the face of adversity, love and integrity can create inviolable strength, even when others try to manipulate or intimidate. Emma and Jake burst into the kitchen then, chasing each other around the table, their laughter echoing in the warm light. I watched them, heart swelling, and thought about the many nights I had lain awake, worried, terrified, wondering if I could protect them. Now, seeing their joy, I understood that the effort